Welcome, everybody. If you're here for the introduction to asset building, you are in the right place. I thought actually because we are a relatively small group, and it's good to kind of keep us moving and our brains moving at the end of the day, I would actually take the mic around and just do quick introductions of who we have in the room today, just to hear who you are, and then we'll probably do some more with all of you as we go forward. But before we introduce ourselves, and I'm going to come around. So we're on Zoom today, so that's why I'm bringing the mic to you, because we need to hear you all.
Hello, I'm Anthony Arakaki with the Portland Community Reinvestment Initiatives, or PCRI.
Hi, I'm Kelly Castanero with Casa of Oregon.
Hi, my name is Daniela, and I'm with Centro Cultural Rapid Rehousing.
My name is Brandon Kirchner. I am a supervisor, housing case manager for HCMS and Rapid Rehousing.
Tori, I also work with Centro, and I do program management.
I'm Grant Hook. I also work with Casa of Oregon.
I'm Coach Chavez, also with Casa of Oregon.
Hi, I'm Samantha, and I'm from Northwest Coastal Housing. I'm their project manager.
Thank you. This is great.
Hi, I'm Miriam Rahali with the Portland Housing Bureau, and I'm a construction coordinator.
Hi, I'm Rachel Howard with the Oregon iSector. We're a nonprofit that facilitates cross-sector partnerships.
I'm Liz Lorenzo with the Wells Fargo Foundation.
Hi, I'm Angela Guo with HMS Developments.
And I'm Carly Harrison with Edlin and Company. Hello, Teresa Diebel. I'm with Occam Advisors and help the Oregon Community Foundation make investments.
Thank you, everybody. It's great to get a good sense of who's in the room. I'll introduce myself, and the panel will introduce themselves as well, and then we'll go over the agenda for the day, and then we have one more question for you. So welcome. My name is Annette Case, and I'm the Pacific Northwest Program Officer for the Asset Funders Network, and we're a national network and membership organization of grant makers working to advance equitable wealth building.
I'm Kymberly Horner. I am the Executive Director and CEO for the Portland Community Reinvestment Initiatives. Want to say thank you for those who are here and the people in the audience and online. We are an affordable housing nonprofit that is culturally specific. We are the largest Black-led affordable housing nonprofit in Northeast Portland and maybe even Oregon in general.
Hi, everybody. My name is Rebekah Bassett. My pronouns are she and her. I work for Casa of Oregon. I'm the Family Economic Opportunity Program Director there.
Good afternoon, everyone. Nicole Davison-Leon, Executive Director at the Hispanic Metropolitan Chamber, pronouns she, her, ella.
Great. Well, we have a great panel here for you today, and I'm going to serve mostly as your moderator. So today, this is designed as an introduction to asset building. I'm guessing that many of you have some experience or some ideas about what that means or what that is. So we're going to hear a little bit from you in a moment. But we also today we're planning to talk about as we go through this presentation, we're three kind of key points that we're going to hit around concepts about wealth and asset building, different approaches and types of asset building, and then we'll kind of dig a little bit more specifically into asset building strategies. But I think, and I'm curious to hear, obviously everyone has sort of different experiences with asset building and ideas around wealth. And so I have to get used to having the clicker. Where's the clicker? It's not working. Oh, there we go. So we want to hear from all of you a little bit about, in thinking about, what does wealth look like to you? What does it, when you hear the term wealth, what does that raise up for you, and what does that feel like to you? So we can just do sort of a popcorn for anybody who feels like they want to answer this question, and I can repeat it. Thank you. So that was when you're stable and you have what you need and you have a lot of great relationships and a lot of money. That's really great. Thank you. Who else did you?
I was going to say the same thing,
Stability.
stability.
Feeling secure. Liz?
I was going to say a significant surplus.
A significant surplus.
I would say for me personally, I feel like that wealth might have passive income. Like the second says we get the rich, where generating passive income like investments and
Passive income like your investments. When you have passive income like investments and property and things.
I think of generational wealth and having, especially minority communities, getting houses to pass it on.
So talking about generational wealth and when you have a house and you're able to pass it on to the next generation. Anyone else?
Assets minus liability equals equity.
Assets minus liabilities equals equity. That is right. Last call. That was a chat GPT. All right. Thank you all so much. It's really great to hear from people different perspectives about what wealth means. And I think that's a big part of when we talk about asset building. I think the idea is that really, and it is true that the common definition is what you own minus what you owe. And I think that is, owning being, retirement accounts, savings accounts, a house, property, investments. There are a lot of ways that people think about what you own minus kind of the debts that you might have. And I think that's common, but also I think we recognize that there are lots of different kinds of ideas and concepts about wealth. So for me, and I think hearing about, security, that's one that I think about a lot, like what is, having the ability to sort of exhale and not be worried all the time about kind of what's next, and just having a sense of peace of mind. I think all of those things are sort of different ways to think about it. So I'm going to do a little bit of context setting around these ideas about wealth, and then we'll have some conversation here among the panel, but we all agree that we would love it if people, just like you did now, would just raise your hand when you have questions, and I know we have some listeners online too, so we'll just kind of take questions as we go too, if something is popping into your mind. But I just want to say a little bit about, so those, different concepts of wealth are individual, as we just heard, and for different, communities as well. I think a lot about, and actually I want to point out to people, and if we can do links and send out resources at the end, I will, but not too long ago, the Coalition of Communities of Color developed and released a report on the racial wealth gap in Oregon. And I think that does a really great job of looking at how different communities like the Latinx community and the Black community and Native communities really think about wealth and think about these concepts differently, like regenerative economies, and what does that look like, and how are people sharing and building wealth among the community and bringing it back to community wealth. And actually I just have a quote from the report, which says that wealth building is about transferring security and belonging, and even ideals of entrepreneurship are not based on the success of Elon Musk, but rather on the success of the grandfather tending on the buffalo herds. So I think just, thinking broadly about when we talk about assets, what does that really mean when we talk about asset building? So with AFN, okay, I'm sorry, I have to get used to having a clicker again. Oh, come on. I don't know why this, sorry. I may have to just go without the slides, but the Asset Funders Network, as I said, we're a national network of grant makers working to advance equitable wealth building, and we really think about assets broadly across several dimensions that are intersecting with each other, such as financial wealth, health, and employment and income, small businesses, post-secondary education, and of course, racial and gender wealth gaps as well. And in the Northwest, so I help support organizations in Oregon and Washington, and we're really focusing on the root causes of wealth inequities. And, oh, so how did you get that to work? It advanced. Okay. In Oregon, that specifically looks like the Oregon Economic Justice Roundtable. And that is actually a shared table of funders and community organizations working together to advance economic justice, economic and racial justice. And in that work together, the idea is that we are centering community voices and community voices of color, and doing that work together, we understand what it takes to what needs to be funded and how we are achieving economic justice goals. And we have co-created, oh, could you, I'm sorry, advance it since you're so good at that. Together, working all together, we have co-created this definition of economic justice. And I think, and it is, as you will see, it is, I think justice is very related to the sense of wealth and assets as well, because it's sort of what is our cumulative history over time that has gone on, and that's acknowledged in this definition here too. And then also the vision for economic justice. One more, and then I'm done with the slides, almost. So that is how we come to this work in Oregon. And we work to address, as I said, these significant inequities in wealth and the root causes of those. And I think when we talk about these different concepts of wealth, that's really important for understanding asset building, because depending on your concept is really going to be what is helping you think about what the solution is to address inequities. So I think it's really great to kind of lift up these different ideas that we hold about wealth and assets. So today, all of the panelists in their own context are going to be addressing some really critical points about and concepts about wealth, and thinking about what is the difference between income and wealth. And that might seem simple, but I think that sometimes those things can kind of get conflated, and especially as income is often sort of the day-to-day cash that is coming in, and that is different than the sort of generational wealth that we talked about before. And when we talk about generational wealth, I think also, you know, we talk about the wealth gap, which I think many people probably, maybe you are familiar with, in which, for example, black households have, or white households have, 8 times more wealth than black households, and 5 times more wealth than Latinx households. And so I think about the wealth gap. Yes, it's a number, and it is a measurable, quantifiable number, but that number is really reflective of sort of the accumulation of policies and practices over time that, and as it relates to generational wealth, that have either helped support the growth of wealth or have been extractive when it comes to wealth. And also, when we talk about these concepts of wealth, I think thinking about, are they really focused? A lot of times our solutions have been predetermined by someone else, have been focusing on the individual, and really kind of trying to get at what is it that has been, how have those policies and practices been designed to create inequities, and how do we want to think about going forward when these, with other sort of community ideas and definitions about wealth. And just to sort of illustrate that, thank you, is this slide about boosts and blocks, which are policies that have been passed over time, and how they have helped some people to really help generate wealth, or they have been extracted in various ways and really have taken away wealth and really impede the ability for people to access and build wealth over time. And so we can't, when we talk about wealth too, we can't really just talk about wealth building. We also have to really account for the ways in which wealth is taken away. And when we think about economic justice, I think that's a really big part of what it means to get towards economic justice. So that is, oh, and the only other thing I wanted to say was that I think And we don't have time to go into all the details because we have a little bit of time together today, so this is just an introductory session. But I think just to note that more than income and more than education, because I think there's a lot of times stories that, oh, you just need to work hard and earn an income and you'll become wealthy, or you need to get higher education. And I think more than income and more than education, how someone is racialized in relation to these policies and the accumulation of wealth or extraction of wealth over time is actually the key factor about this differential access to wealth and inequities in wealth. So with that, I'll stop and just see if anyone has any questions or anything they wanted to, before we hop into a panel discussion, a flowing panel discussion with everyone here and all of you. Okay, so I think we just want to kind of get started and hear from everybody about your context and the same sort of concepts of wealth. We can start with Kymberly about what does wealth and asset building mean in the context of your work?
Again, I'm Kymberly Horner, the Executive Director for the Portland Community Reinvestment Initiatives. Our organization has been around since about 1992. Appreciate everybody being here today because I do think this is a very important conversation that we're having, particularly after coming from the lunch engagement that we had and having the doctor who really professed a lot of good information about what's happened in terms of communities of color, particularly the Black community, when it comes time to generational wealth building and really having wealth stripped away. In order to really understand where I'm coming from, I need to really explain a little bit about our organization and how we developed. The Portland Community Reinvestment Initiatives, which we go by the acronym PCRI, was developed in 1992, and it was in reaction to illegal mortgage practices happening to primarily Black residents, Black homeowners, and lower income people. These residents were targeted by a mortgage company that really set forth some very illegal mortgage practices. So they would find the people that needed to get into housing, and then from there they would get them into mortgage provisions that had a escalation of what they called a balloon payment at the time. So they would convince the families that they needed to make all the health and safety and code improvements to the property that they were interested in first. And then from there, within a few years after the families made the improvements, then there was a balloon payment that the family could not afford. Once that balloon payment hit, the families were foreclosed on and they would lose the property. And this practice went on and on and on and on for several years. And finally, after a lot of conversation in the community was occurring about what was happening to these families, there was a grassroots effort to go after the mortgage company, and they were actually arrested for racketeering and fraud. An attorney stepped in, and our organization was formed to claw back about 350 single-family homes that were on the verge of foreclosure, in addition to helping the families, some of the other families that were losing their homes to the foreclosure process. So 350 single-family homes were parked into PCRI, and that became the main root of our assets. At the time the attorney fought to get these properties, they were about $32,000. Now we're talking about 1 bedroom, 2 bedroom, some 4 bedroom homes in our portfolio that were built anywhere from the early 1900s and some properties all the way up to the late 1980s. So if you can imagine our organization having properties that were picked up for about $32,000, and now here it is 30 years later, the value of those properties. So we were able to get assets just based on the fact that we had to fight to save and keep people in Northeast Portland, because people were getting pushed out, they were getting outpriced. The city had some policies in place that actually failed the Black community by creating a hospital where they used eminent domain to take property away from those families. There were families pushed out because a stadium was built and they had to make way for a highway. So all of these failed policies that were on the books at that time really led to gentrification and pulled assets away from families that could have been doing the asset building process that they saw their white counterparts doing, and now they've lost assets. Even those families that were maybe given a fair price for their home when the city used eminent domain to take the property away from them. If you can imagine, you know, giving your property away for $30,000, $40,000, or $50,000 at the time, if they had held on to those properties for the 30 years, even longer, those properties are now worth $400,000 on average. So there was a lot of wealth loss in this particular area. There were people that were pushed out, and that is why we as an organization stay rooted in our mission cause, which is to keep people in Northeast Portland that were historic to the area. In addition to that, we do a lot of more development to bring more people into the area and to keep people into the area. And the development that we do is building multifamily apartment complexes, and we also build properties for home ownership. So when we talk about asset building, our organization looks at it from two perspectives. It looks at it from the perspective of a nonprofit holding on to assets to keep people located in an area. And then we do it from the process where we have home ownership training, and we do new development where we build brand new units and we put them on the market for home ownership opportunities. Sometimes these are deeply subsidized. We get subsidies from organizations like Wells Fargo, from very good banking partners that help us with down payment assistance in the form of a grant. And then that helps us get people into a new asset where they can start the individual asset building as an individual. So looking at this conversation from two perspectives, one being a business owner, a nonprofit, owning a great deal of properties in the area, and then the other conversation is helping people develop that generational wealth. I don't want to take all of the time. I'll pass the microphone over to Rebekah so that she can speak to what her organization does, but then I'll circle back to this same conversation as we continue on with our discussion.
Thanks, Kymberly. Yeah, so at Casa of Oregon, we do affordable to housing development. We have a manufactured housing cooperative development program. We're a CDFI, and then we have an asset building and financial capability department. So within our work, asset building and wealth creation takes a lot of different forms. I think the two things that we do that most resonate with wealth creation and asset building are the manufactured housing cooperative development work, which helps create resident owners who are living in manufactured home communities. And then our Family Economic Opportunity Department does asset building through, predominantly through matched savings accounts. So what I'm gonna talk about for most of today is the matched savings accounts piece. But I think it's important to know that there's a lot of different ways that asset building and wealth creation shows up. So within our IDA program is funded through the state of Oregon. It's called the Oregon IDA Initiative. And so within that program, we're able to partner with nonprofit organizations and educational institutions across the state to create asset building opportunities. And so this allows low and moderate income individuals who reside in Oregon to save for something that's meaningful to them. And leveraging the power of all of these organizations that we partner with to help them get into homeownership, help them start a small business, help them start a retirement account. There's a wide variety of ways that shows up. We're, as an organization, because we're an intermediary working with these other organizations, we really try to focus our funding and our intentions on lifting up culturally specific organizations, culturally responsive organizations, as a way of saying that asset building in these communities is really important. And so we try to partner with organizations and move that wealth forward into those communities. One thing I want to say too is that for us, asset building and wealth creation also shows up through increases in credit scores that our clients are getting, accessing a bank account for the first time, being able to leverage a loan for a car or for a mortgage, opening a retirement account. So there's a lot of different things that occur within the context of a match savings program. And some of them result in having more actual cash wealth. Some of them result in having less debt. Some of them result in that sense of stability. So everything that people mentioned is really resonating with how we try to bring asset building and wealth creation to our work.
Thank you. Good afternoon again, everyone. My name is Nicole Davis-Leon with the Hispanic Metropolitan Chamber. And how we look at asset growth is really, so the Chamber was created in 1994 because of the lack of opportunities to access wealth, whether this was through small businesses, whether this was through already people in their careers, and I would still argue very relative to today, but really the lack of opportunities for that, whether it was our community was not in those tables to make decisions, or whether our community was not giving opportunities to be able to create wealth for themselves and their families. The Hispanic Metropolitan Chamber our goal is for long-term economic stability, and we do this through 3 different ways. One is through education. So we've given about $3 million to students in Oregon and Southwest Washington to really be able to break some of those barriers that students struggle with getting to higher education, whether it's undergrad, whether it's grad, or grad programs. We also provide assistance through we also support our small businesses through technical assistance. That is a one-on-one support where we use different tools, such as the IDA funding for some of our small businesses. And then lastly, through our skill building services. So that is our Latino leadership program for those who are in their mid-career levels and are wanting to elevate. To go back to what I said, having those people be in decision tables, be on boards, be on governance committees, be in the cities. So really trying to elevate our community for that, with the idea that all of this really creates that economic wealth. A big part of how we address who we serve is what we call the first generation wealth creators. And when I say first generation wealth creators, I'm specifically referring to the financial wealth of stuff. So we heard somebody say about housing, and this goes from being the first ones from purchasing houses to purchasing cars to opening bank accounts to trying to translate what a credit score is to their family. So really that population is our main population of the first generation wealth creators in Oregon and Southwest Washington.
Great, thank you. I know that, so we have different perspectives around housing and sort of the historical perspective, which is really thinking about how are we moving forward from what history has done and in some ways being reparative, and IDAs, and I think you said individual development accounts, yes, about people being able to save and decide what kind of assets they're looking for going forward, and then having first generation wealth creators, which is great. You tell us a little bit more about when you're working with people, what is your approach to asset building, and how are you thinking about that in your own specific work?
Again, in our specific work, we are more than just an affordable housing nonprofit. We're also a developer. And what that does for the community is it helps elevate the entire community in an economic way. And when we enter into conversations with the general public about the work that we do, we always try to be very intentional about the mere fact that as a development arm, it is infusing millions upon millions of dollars into the local economy. So when we build the affordable housing units for the rental side, when we build affordable housing units for home ownership, this is what we consider to be economic gardening. And in doing so, we are helping contractors, subcontractors, people that work in the restaurant industry, all the supply chain of getting housing built is creating economic opportunities for other individuals. And we consider that to be something very, very important that we do, because we understand that communities of color don't always have an opportunity to go to college and get a 4-year degree or even go to like an Ivy League school. We understand that science, technology, engineering, mathematics is very important, but we also understand that there's the C in that, where we call it STEM plus C, and that's construction. And in construction, there are so many different jobs that are available to lower income people that can then create their own economic opportunities by creating jobs and businesses that are stemming from the construction trade. So when we are very face forward with our local politicians and even people at the state and federal level, we really try to explain that providing affordable housing and doing the asset building is much more greater than what they're really looking at. It is creating economic opportunities for people in the community to start businesses off of the work that we're doing. And in addition to having IDA programs and homeowner assistance, and we have programs where we train people to get into home ownership, we also train people for the foreclosure process, because it's a real thing. Once you get people into home ownership, there is a number of people that still will not be successful, because generational wealth building is not necessarily trained and something that's talked about in communities of color. So until we can get people educated about how to hold on to an asset and what that asset can do, instead of just being a home for you to rest in, it can also be used as leverage to start a business, to go to college. There's equity that's being developed, and that's the other piece that we train our people to be extremely mindful of. And those are the things that we practice, and I think that we have very similar models to what Casa's doing as well.
So within our individual development account program and our other match savings programs, first and foremost, we just take the approach of asset building as generational wealth building. And so when we approach it from that lens, we're always centering racial equity and economic equity first, because we know that those communities have been stripped of assets over time. So we're trying to get those dollars back into those communities. And a lot of that really has to do with saying asset building looks different for every community. With our funding, it's really exciting to be able to be flexible, because you might have somebody where they've come into the program for home ownership, but over time they really discovered that paying down their student loan debt is going to provide them more leverage down the road. And so they want to shift gears. And so they may not be walking out with a piece of generational wealth, but they're walking out with access and opportunity for something different by having less debt, or a sense of relief of not having to do that. So we try to remain really flexible. We partner with other organizations to provide privately funded IDA programs as well, which gives us a lot of creativity in shaping something that meets the needs of the community who's interested. And there's a lot of different asset building going on in Oregon, which is really exciting. One of the organizations that we're partnering with is going to be working on student loan debt repayment through match savings, which I'm really, really excited to see get off the ground. So one of the other things that I think is really interesting, and what Kymberly mentioned about retaining people in their homes and educating people on foreclosure. We're not doing this at Casa, but I think it's really important to, through financial education, and what a lot of our partners are doing financial education, and we help support them in that, starting the conversation about protecting those assets and doing that through estate planning and making sure you have proper documentation and you understand your obligations helps people not lose track. In a previous life, when I was doing foreclosure counseling myself, the number of people who would come in after having lost a loved one and they didn't know where the paperwork was, their name wasn't on the deed to the home. And so the amount of effort people have to go in to prove that they own the thing that they own is really terrifying. And when people are in that crisis place, the last thing they want to have to do is prove that they live in this house and that it belongs to them. So it's really important to provide that education to people so that they have that to help support their assets that they're purchasing.
At the Chamber, our approach for asset building in an equitable way is really intentionally designing and implementing programs that address the systematic barriers. Sorry, tongue twister there. And really also right now you said protecting, and that resonates a lot with us because, you know, in the Latinx community, in the Latino community, we hear about all these assets that the community has. We have about $2.8 trillion in the GDP in the U.S. That's a lot of money. That's a lot of power. But really, what we've struggled as a community intentionally has been done by how do we protect those assets and how do we make sure that these assets continue to create wealth for our community. So that's really where the approach to us is this culturally specific programming for our communities and really understanding the power that we hold, but also the lack of knowledge of how do we protect that assets, the investments that we're doing in our community is really how we take a cut at the pie, or I don't know what the saying is, but yeah, that's really our focus there.
Thank you. I'm just going to do a quick check on questions because I can't see everybody. Was there anybody have any questions they want to ask yet? More time at the end. Okay. And also, if you see somebody's hand, please let me know since I can't see everybody. So I think I'm hearing some of these other things that are really important about community building and community wealth building, which I think, you know, a lot of times, as we talked about before, a lot of programs and efforts are working with individuals or families, but also thinking about how this kind of plays out when we're building wealth, that how that can be important for communities and ripples back out to communities, but also we can be intentional about building community by preventing gentrification and protecting and supporting supporting those assets, protecting those assets, and also just thinking about the ways in which wealth is different than income, that it is, you know, as I said before, and as Kymberly was saying, you know, income being so much more about the day-to-day, and that's what sort of helps you kind of manage the cash flow, but that wealth is really there to help you support to take a risk or to, you know, as a reservoir when you are facing a challenge, and, you know, that you're not losing everything, that maybe you can, you know, you're not losing your home if something is going wrong or something breaks and you need help with that. So I think just thinking about the ways in which wealth operates, that it is really so much more of you know, the ways that it has operated too, and thinking about the bigger picture of that it is, you know, where it has been boosted or blocked is really sort of a feature and a design and not so much of an accident. So I just think too, as we're talking about some of these concepts related to wealth, that the ways in which that this has been done over time, and so exciting to hear about some of these specific strategies that are really working to change that. So I know we've kind of touched on, I think we've touched on quickly some of the strategies because there's so much that people are doing that it's difficult to kind of get into all of them, but we do want to hear a little bit more specifically about some of what the asset, a little more in depth about some of the asset building strategies that you're working on. Why are they working? Who are they working for? And how do people connect with them?
Does anyone else want to go first? Okay. Well, again, one of the things that we do, and I see some of our partners that are in the room too. For example, we're actually received some fundraising grants from Casa for our upcoming fundraising event. So, you know, we want to say thank you for that, and we appreciate that support. But I also see Carly in the audience from Girding Edlin. She was very instrumental in helping us develop one of our largest affordable housing complexes on Martin Luther King Jr. Boulevard, and that's Beatrice Morrow. And then I see Teresa in the audience when she was with Meyer Memorial Trust. She really dug in and helped us find grant money from Meyer to support the development. I want to talk about it from the perspective of a developer that is culturally specific and really needs to be mindful and intentional about holding on to our assets. So imagine, if you will, us as a Black-led organization owning 350 single-family homes that we now probably have a value of about $550 million in assets. And that's pretty significant for a small, culturally specific organization to be charged with. What we do when we move forward with new development, because we have to make sure that everything that we do protects the assets that we currently have under our control. So we've got to be very careful and very intentional when we draw lines of credit that we don't get overextended, because the banks typically will make us use some of our properties within our portfolio as collateral. So we've got to be very intentional on meeting construction schedules, construction deadlines, not going over budget with our construction projects. So on that end, that's how we have to be extremely intentional. When we're talking about the multifamily housing, we typically work with a consulting firm to make sure that we keep all the guardrails in place, because construction and new development is where things get very, very sideways for organizations that are trying to build additional assets to support the community. And if you're not careful with what we call the capital stack, your project can get very upside down quickly. And so we work with OHCS on their LIFT program that allows us an opportunity to get funding from the state. We also work with an organization like Meyer Memorial Trust to add to the capital stack to build an affordable housing unit. And in addition to that, there's the Portland Clean Energy Fund that can be applied to the capital stack. We go for a construction loan from someone like the Wells or other banks that provide construction loans for this work. We get a developer fee that sometimes is deferred. So when you develop multifamily housing projects or that are low-income housing tax credit projects, you've got to stack your capital so that you can make sure that at the end of the day, there is a developer fee that comes back to the organization. Sometimes these developer fees are deferred and they don't come until the building is cash flowing, but eventually that is another part of the puzzle that you're trying to get information about out to the public, in that not only are you owning an asset, but there is a developer fee once the project is cash flowing. Another area that our organization has to be very mindful of and careful of when we are building additional assets for our portfolio is how you manage. How are you managing and maintaining that asset after you get it? So a lot of conversation goes on with affordable housing developers, and we talk about, you know, how fun it is that we're getting sticks in the ground and that we have a new development coming online. But operationally, you have to be very, very careful, because at the end of the day, once those projects are built, they must cash flow so that you can continue to pay for the maintenance, the security, additional lighting that you might need, and there's much, much more that goes on with building affordable housing and building assets. We also try to take people who are going into our home ownership programs through the same type of drills that we go through as an organization, so that we inform them of all of the pitfalls that happen as a new homeowner and how you have to be very vigilant, because most of our residents are used to renting. And so when a light bulb needs to be changed and they call us and say, you sold us this house and now my light bulbs are out, can you come over and repair or fix them? We have to really encourage them. Our relationship is no longer that type of relationship. This is how you change your light bulbs. This is how you fix a broken toilet. But at some point, we really encourage the people that are purchasing in our home ownership programs how to make sure that they're safeguarding themselves and understanding the maintenance part of home ownership. So I'm always segueing into conversations that I just really feel are important to get out there, and I'll turn the microphone over to the next person so they can answer your question with more intention.
Thank you. Okay, so I don't know how much people know about the IDA program that's here in Oregon, so I'm going to give a little bit of background. So I apologize if some of this is familiar information. The Oregon IDA Initiative, which is the name of the IDA program here in Oregon, is funded through Oregon Housing and Community Services and is managed by a nonprofit called Neighborhood Partnerships. They fund 11 fiduciary organizations in the state that then provide IDAs to their client base. Of those 11, there's a small handful that are considered network providers, and then the rest of them are considered single site providers. So the single site providers are doing direct service to their client base. Examples of that would be like Portland Housing Center is a single site provider. They have a homeownership program and they're providing IDAs to their clients. Casa acts as a network provider. So what we're then doing is subgranting to, right now we have just under 50 other program partners between nonprofit organizations and educational institutions. So we subgrant to those institutions and then they do the direct service with their clients. Internally, we have one direct service program called E3, which is an educational match savings program, and that's a partnership with the Oregon Alliance for Independent Colleges and Universities, mostly serving first-generation students of color who are attending private colleges and universities here in Oregon. If you want to hear more about that, I talk for hours about it. So our program is really exciting because we're able to offer, I think we have 8 different asset types. So those would be different savings tracks that people can save for, everything from home ownership to home repair, assistive technology, retirement, vehicle, a wide variety. And so you can see that some of those are generational wealth building types of IDAs, and some of those are more functional assets. Vehicles helping you get to and from work. It's not necessarily helping you save for college. But then we can also help people through the IDA save into an ABLE account, save into a 529. So there's a lot of different ways to promote asset building within our program. In addition to that, well, before I jump from that, we serve anywhere from 250 to 400 people a year through those program partners, and we serve 32 counties. And so if there are folks in the room who are interested in learning more about how to provide IDAs in Oregon, I apparently don't have business cards anymore. Like this whole converting from working at home every day to not working at home every day, I don't have anything that I used to carry with me. So I can stay after and provide my information if folks need it, if they want to learn more about how to get connected to a program provider in the state. We're also very fortunate to have been funded this last year by Business Oregon from the Economic Equity Investment Acts program. It is a super stellar program that just had its very first funding year in 2020. What is this, 2023? I think the funding awards came out in the beginning of 2023. And so what we're able to use that funding for this year is to leverage our existing homeownership IDAs and help move them from a 5-to-1 match to a 10-to-1 match. And so our purpose in doing that is to both help people take advantage of market fluctuations so that they can be more attractive at closing on a deal. They can say, hey, I have $15,000 more that I can offer on this home and be more competitive. And if that isn't an issue for them, then they have twice as much money that they're putting down, so they own more. They have more immediate equity. And as I had mentioned, one of our program partners is doing a student loan debt repayment program. We have another privately funded program that's doing small business development. So there's a wide variety of IDA programs that we're partnering with folks on. And you can certainly go to our website if you want to find out more about our particular IDA programs. But there's a lot of providers in the state, as I mentioned, that are doing some really tremendous work. So I'd be more than happy to also help connect you with other people who are doing similar things.
Thank you. And very short, I'll just say the Hispanic Chamber's strategic approach, one of them has been our small business development, as I mentioned, providing technical assistance, mentoring, helping from credit to understanding your Google Analytics for your business. So it does range from the way of, what type of support the business does need. But a big one that comes to mind of our strategic is obviously our policy and anti-discrimination advocacy. So from helping small businesses talk to banks on what a affordable and ethical banking looks like. So a lot of our I-10 holders, right, there is specific barriers that they face. So really working with financial institutions to address those disparities and to address the lack of support for our I-10 holders. Again, as I mentioned, from just getting a loan, but then also what ID is acceptable. And there's so many, and I'm not going to go too much into the rabbit hole there, but really advocating for some of these barriers that our small businesses face is really a way that we look at this in a holistic approach from, yes, we provide technical assistance one-on-one, but also how are we then really supporting the overall approach for our small business development for them to be able to succeed and thrive in the economy.
I also wanted to mention that part of the work that we also do is economic development. And we do have an arm of the organization that really helps to uplift people that are looking to either start a business or already own a business. And we point them in the direction as to where to get additional loans and funding. But as a large developer and owner of a lot of land, we also own mixed-use developments. So we've got commercial properties where we plug in businesses that need very reduced rent so that they can start a business and have a place that they call their business home. And some of our properties are also located on some major thoroughfares like Mississippi and Alberta. So it gives an opportunity for small business owners who are culturally specific and just need a very reduced rent structure to get into our properties and then showcase their wares and help grow their business by way of just being on such very, very busy corridors. We also work with Prosper Portland and some of the other city agencies to help these businesses get off the ground and get loans and additional funding to support their businesses.
That's great. Thank you. We're hearing about it. We're going to get into a little bit because you all mentioned different sort of policy initiatives and different kind of systems issues that intersect with the individual and household asset building programs. But I have a quick question for all of you out there. I'm curious if there were specific questions that you had or what you were hoping to come to this session to walk away with from this session. So I'm just curious if there's anything that you haven't heard yet that you wanted to hear about, since we have wonderful experts on the panel here. Anyone?
My question would be around kind of where are the challenges at right now with all this? Is it with financial institutions, government entities? Just speaking to that a little bit.
That it's like I planted you. That was part of my.
You owe me that $20.
Yeah. Well, and I just to add on to that. So, where are the challenges right now? Is the question, and especially thinking about with financial institutions and sort of probably given the history of some of these. What we like to talk about dominant institutions that have held the wealth and the power over time and made those decisions. So want to ask you all about that, and sort of gets to the, working on anti-discrimination. I know, Rebekah, you mentioned the Equity Investment Act, which also kind of came out. I mean, that work came out of a lot of needing to focus on equity and then thinking about so some of the policy stuff and what are the challenges that we want to be addressing. And then I know, Kymberly, you mentioned the developer fee, and I know that there are sometimes culturally responsive organizations that can't get the loan and can't get the backing. They have to partner with someone else in order to get the major loans and the capital stack to do some of this development, and that means that they also miss out on the developer fee, which can help build community wealth. So I'm just curious if you all can speak to this question about the challenges and sort of what's next, and then, kind of thinking about some of the systems actors and other policy opportunities out there. Does anyone want to go first?
We can switch it up next. As I mentioned, policies and stuff, but I think a big one is the investment of the community. So what does that look like? We recently had with our the COVID-19 funds that were coming out to small businesses, right? We had a lot of people say, hey, there was so much money going out. Yet a lot of the Latine businesses did not apply for them. I don't know if necessarily, so it goes into the investment into the community, but then also having people understand the system and having people given the enough time to understand the system that we're trying to navigate when it's been disappropriately affecting them. I would say that's one of the challenges that we face of that. The chicken and the egg, right? So the funding, but then also the lack of support for operational costs, for investment in the community. I recently read an article regarding small businesses are the group that's they mentioned over mentoring. So they have gotten all mentoring classes. They've taken, a lot of the times we think, well, if they only had one more financial education, they would really thrive. There's the small businesses. Entrepreneurs are usually the number one community that is over mentored. So really when I think of that, then it's the investment. That's really where it goes. And we have so many businesses who are like, just give me the opportunity, right? It's just, I got it. I'll do the trainings and I'll do the modules, but it's just that opportunity piece that I think is a big one for us. Along other ones, but that's the one that comes to mind.
There's a couple I think that would really go a long way to help moving asset building and wealth building forward. First of all, there's several really antiquated policies, both state and federal, that exist that punish low-income people for having assets. There's a lot of asset means testing that goes on, and so using Social Security as an example, if somebody who has SSI can't have more than $2,000 of personal assets at any point in time without losing, I think after that they could lose dollar for dollar of their benefit, that's ridiculous. And that $2,000 is from the 50s. $2,000 in the 50s was like a year's worth of money in the bank. And so if those policies aren't going to change with inflation, they're causing real harm and helping people stay below their ability to move forward. Another thing that I would really love to see, I feel like there's a lot of programs and policies, everything from redlining to now I can't think of another example. However, there's all these government policies that create a disparate impact, and there's so much pushback about creating programs to offset that. And so, you know, I know it can be controversial to say there's money specifically for this community. There's money specifically for, you know, the African American community, for the Native American community, et cetera. But I think all these other policies did the damage, and so the government needs to step up to set money aside to reinvest specifically back into those communities. So that's two that I would like to see happen.
This is a big subject for our organization in general. We have a document, it's called Pathway 1000. Pathway 1000 talks about how PCRI is going to develop 1,000 units in a 10-year time span. When I got here, I said, you know, we could do that standing on our heads. It's not that difficult to build that many units, but it is because land is extremely expensive in these areas. Of the Pathway 1000, the 1,000 units, 800 are for home ownership. Where the struggle comes in is the mere fact that we as an organization know that wealth was stripped away from certain families. And so in order to help bring that wealth back to the family, we are building home ownership units. But when you talk to government agencies, they do not want us to have like just a fee simple program for a mortgage. They want us to have models that do not replicate what we would consider to be generational wealth building. They want us primarily to use a land trust model where the property owner does not necessarily own 100% of the land and the unit. There's a division there, and it's very, very challenging for people to understand when they go to sell their property that they didn't realize that they weren't going to receive the benefit of all of the equity. So the problem that our organization runs into is we don't believe in that model. We believe in a fee simple model where we might put some conditions on the property where you've got to stay in for like 15 years. And then if you sell after 15 years, any of the down payment assistance or other subsidies that you were given are extinguished at that point, and then you can receive the full benefit of the equity. So getting government agencies to understand that deep damage was done to specific communities, and it's okay for folks to share in the growth of the equity of the property that they're purchasing. So that system needs to change, and I'm not saying that there shouldn't be land trust models or co-op models. I'm saying that our organization is committed to making sure that those who have lost generational wealth have an opportunity to gain it back. But there are times when the state won't give us money for home ownership units to be developed because they want us to only be in a land trust model. Recently, the state released what they call HDIP funds, and it is the Housing Development Incubator Program. It is the first time that they did not require us to have a land trust model, so we jumped on the opportunity to gain those dollars. In addition to having the regulatory requirements change at the state level, we also run into just impacts that neighbors are not necessarily interested in affordable housing being in their backyard. So it's the whole NIMBY, not in my backyard, concept that we're constantly up against. So there's a lot of policies that need to change, including allowing our organization to give very, very deep down payment assistance and working with the mortgage companies to really understand that it's okay for us to give $200,000 in down payment assistance because that is the only way that this person can get in at an affordable level with the prices of homes in Northeast Portland.
Thank you. Yeah, I think, you know, it's so interesting, right? Because I think what you're all saying, and you're kind of raising not just, I mean, obviously there's a lot of history and how this happened and accumulated over years and affected generational wealth over many centuries, but also what's happening today and sort of how still policies are being designed separate from communities and what communities are looking for. And you know, we think a lot about that at the Oregon Economic Justice Roundtable too, which I can't remember if I said this before, we co-lead that with neighborhood partnerships, but and with a steering committee of funders and community organizations. But I think we think a lot about, you know, what would it be to design something different that really gets at sort of this, you know, what would that design look like going forward that we'd really want to see? And of course, we think a lot about centering community voice and really having policy that is aligning with what people are looking for. And so I'm curious to hear from all of you, you know, if you could either wave a magic wand or if you're thinking about what design would look like going forward, you know, in terms of what you would want to see in a new system and new models, like what would that look like?
So this will also answer the question that you asked me, and it's concerning the developer fee. And for our organization, when we're building affordable housing, especially the multifamily developments that come with a developer fee, there are many times when the city or even the state will require that we work with a consultant. And there are times when those consultants want a deeper share of the pie, piece of the pie, slice of the pie. And sometimes we are bringing extreme talent to the table. Like if you talk to my housing development team right now, they can tell you how to capital stack all of the necessary funds to get an affordable housing complex built. But at the same time, there's always pushback where we are required to have our wagons hooked to another consulting firm in order for us to get funded. So some of the system changes that need to happen and be looked at immediately is how we allow for culturally specific organizations to grow and thrive and not have to develop with a specific partner that is not culturally specific, because at the end of the day, we are the ones that are holding on to the asset. We need a deeper developer fee so that we can reinvest that money back into the property. Whereas the consultant, after the development is complete, they get to leave. And we as an organization are still holding the bag with a very reduced developer fee that we cannot invest back into the property. So help getting that resurrected and reviewed, and maybe having some system changes and policy changes with how smaller, culturally specific affordable housing providers are able to develop on their own without having to work with a consultant or share that developer fee.
Applause. I think the thing that I would wave the wand to make happen, we're very fortunate in Oregon to have a reliable funding source, but there's huge and tremendous demand for this program, and that funding source isn't sufficient. And so I would encourage financial institutions and foundations to fund asset building programs generously. I think match savings accounts aren't super sexy. They're not helping little kids go to college or like doing all the things that people get really excited about. They're slow and steady savings towards a goal, and often they're overlooked and overshadowed by funding opportunities outside of our state mechanisms. So I would really encourage those avenues to invest deeply in the organizations and in the programs that are doing that hard work.
I would echo what Rebekah said, and I think, and I believe it's called, and I'm philanthropic trust giving. So for a lot of us in the nonprofit, the fact that I think we're highly defunded or not funded enough, but then the model a lot of the times isn't, it's not sustainable long term. So for example, a lot of the times we're in a reimbursement, right? That's assuming that we as a nonprofit have the funds for quarterly reporting. So that's just one example of how the capacity building for nonprofits, for our small businesses, for all of that goes all tailored into one thing because of the restrictions that a lot of the times grantees or contracts come and tie with that. We have contracts that will get billed at the end of it. If we were a large business, that might be doable. For a nonprofit, we cannot run a whole year without getting some of that funding. So if I could, and maybe it's because it's reporting season for me, that if I could wave the wand today, that would probably be a big one of moving that model into more equitable and accessible and funding. BIPOC nonprofits tend to be the least funded in the philanthropic world. So that would be my waved wand.
Also having our money be the last money in instead of the first money in, and so that would be helpful. And I think that's part of what Nicole is saying. And then the other thing that needs to happen is the regulatory requirements and the reporting requirements are strangling our organizations. They are so deep. I don't think most people, when they go into housing, understand how deep the reporting requirements are that are coming from our government partners. That's the magic wand that needs to be waved.
Oh, yes. I didn't see where the question was. Sorry. Yes, go ahead. Thank you. Yeah, that's great. And I should say for everyone online, thank you for being with us. We were just talking about trying to be able to use Section 8 vouchers and other subsidies, public subsidies that are coming to families to be able to use those for asset building, and giving a long time horizon for that. So I think what I'm also hearing, so I'm hearing generally is in this work and how we can think about going forward in the future, what the process is, how we do that, how are we listening to communities, how are we making sure that communities are driving the process, so the how is really important, and also that we are actually following that up with accountability and funding and investing in communities and investing in the way that communities want to be invested in. And so I would take those as the takeaways from this session. I want to thank you all for being here with us today and spending time, and hope we can continue to connect and have this conversation about asset building. We'll be here for a few minutes if you want to chat more. Thank you. And thank you to our panelists.